Welcome back to another episode of Becoming Ourselves, a Work in Progress podcast. Today is going to be a little bit of an episode similar to what Joel did the other week, where he talked about cold showers. But today he covered for me while I was on vacation. I'm covering for him while he's out and about. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about credit scores, what they are, why they matter, and how can we affect them, as well as a little bit of additional information that I find interesting because I'm a bit of a finance nerd. And so we're going to jump right into it. Hopefully you find this interesting or useful, or ideally both. So let's start. What is a credit score? A credit score in the United States is a number between 300 and 850 that is assigned to each person that defines how creditworthy or likely to pay off debt they are. This is an arbitrary number. It's based on a few factors that I'll get into later, but essentially banks want to know if you're going to pay off debt before they give you money, before they lend you money, because if you're not, they don't want to take that risk. And that's just the system that is in place already. As I said, it's a number between 300 and 850. That's an odd thing. I don't know why they didn't do 0 to 550, but it is 300 to 850, and even through that, the distribution is quite non-standard. So the average score in 2022 by FICO was 716, so that's quite a ways toward the top. Typically, anything above 720 is considered excellent. So 720 to 850 is considered excellent, the top tier of credit. There's not too much you have to do to upgrade that. Once you're 720, maybe 730, 740, you're going to be getting the best rates on everything that involves credit. So there's not much you have to do to get up. You don't get a prize for hitting 850 or even hitting 800. There's some places that recommend 800 is where excellent starts, and 720 to 799 is great or very good or something. But in general, once you're over 720, 730, 740, just keep on how you're doing it. There's not too much you have to change to improve to maximize that, because there's no benefit past a certain number. From 690 to 719 roughly is considered good, so that will qualify you for loans typically, but they might be at a little bit higher rate, so you won't be getting quite as good of a deal, but you still often qualify for loans. Then from 630 to 689 is considered fair. That's going to range where sometimes you'll get a loan, sometimes you won't qualify for it, and that can be a challenging place to be, because even when you do qualify for it, often there's a little bit of a premium, so you have to pay a little bit more on interest. The rate is higher that you have to pay, so that's not ideal. And then anything from 629 down to 300 is considered bad, and that's definitely a place where improvement is necessary to be able to take out loans. Typically, banks don't like lending to that area of the credit score distribution because they find it too risky. I'm not going to get into much to if that's true or not. I think it can be a bit of an arbitrary system, and so I don't love saying just bad, right? But it's just, this is more of an analysis of what is rather than a diagnosis of what could be or should be. That's what a credit score is. It's not a number that says how good at finance you are or how much money you're worth or even how much money you have. It's an arbitrary number based on a few factors that is really focusing on how likely you are to repay debt that's issued to you. Why does this matter? Why am I even making this episode? On a day-to-day basis, it typically doesn't matter that much. I'm not walking around getting asked my credit score by very many people, but it can matter a lot in certain situations. Those situations would be when you want to buy a house, when you want to buy a car sometimes, or if you are even just applying for a credit card or some other form of credit, it can be pretty important there. So it's one of those things where day to day hardly matters, but there are a few big life events, and you really want to be set up well during those life events. When you are applying for a mortgage, depending on the circumstances, you either won't get accepted for a mortgage if you have a credit score that's too low, or you will get approved for a mortgage, but the rate will be higher. So the rate will be, you'll be having to pay more in interest each payment for as long as you're paying off the house. So really not ideal there. That can rack up in a unfortunate direction and be a pretty challenging financial spot to land in. So you definitely want to be set up pretty well for what that looks like, and set up pretty well with a good credit score before trying to buy a house if possible. Same with buying a car. If you're trying to finance a car and take out a loan to buy said car, then they're going to check your credit score. And if your credit score is too low, they'll either say, no, we won't lend you money for this, or yeah, we'll lend you money, but you have to pay extra. And then with credit cards, usually they'll just say, no, you're not approved. Although there can be situations where they say, yes, you're approved, but your rate is higher. Although credit cards can be a little bit complicated. That maybe is a topic for another episode. So the best way for me to think about this is like on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't matter that much. A few life events, it matters a lot. And when it does matter, it really does typically matter quite a bit. So it can be a little hard to conceptualize that in a lot of ways, because sometimes, most of the time, you can go through life without thinking about it at all. And then occasionally it's, oh, wow, this is all I think about. So complicated, but hopefully that clears it up a little bit. Now let's get into what can we do to affect this, and what are the factors that go into how this plays out and how this is calculated. So the primary factor that's calculated, there's 5 factors that matter, but they're not split evenly. So the primary factor that matters is payment history. Are you making your credit card payments on time? Are you making your credit payments on time? So your mortgage payments, car loan, credit card, the main ones. There's other that can occur as well, but those are the big ones. If you make those on time, your credit score is going to be pretty good generally. So that's why people always are focusing on make your payments on time. And the big one is if you miss a payment, if you're late on a payment, that will stick on your credit report for 7 years. That's not a super trivial amount of time to have your credit score be artificially lowered because of that one missed payment. So you don't want to be missing payments. That's payment history is the most important factor in defining a credit score. The next one that also for 30%, so these two factors make up over half, 65% of this, but that's amounts owed. So you'll have a credit limit. This credit limit is decided by your income. It's decided by your credit score, your credit worthiness in general. It can be any range of things. When I first got my credit card, it was $500. Not a very high credit limit. Then as I made some payments and they realized, okay, he's for real, quote unquote, went up to a couple $1,000s, and it will keep going up as my income increases and whatever. And that's true for everybody, generally. But the amounts owed, you want to be sticking generally under 30% of that credit limit, because once it goes over, it starts feeling a little bit riskier for the banks. They're saying, yeah, we trust you with that, but on a more real note, we don't, because if something happens, it's harder to pay that off, right? There's just more money owed. And then you have the other two length of credit history is another one for worth 15%. That is something you don't have a ton of control over in the short term, obviously, but it does matter long term. And a really big thing is don't delete old accounts. Don't close out old lines of credit just because you don't use them anymore. So even if you have an old credit card that you don't use, don't close out that account, because that will be helping your credit score. But like, I got my credit card a year and a half ago, and so they're still saying he hasn't had credit for that long. Okay, that's fine. There's not much I can do about that. Ideally, by the time I'm looking to buy a house or apply for a car loan or anything like that, ideally that will not be something they're considering too much. And then the last two are credit mix. So that's just different types of credit that you have. The more different types of credit that you have, the more trustworthy you are seen as. So credit card, mortgage, car loan, if you have all three, then they're going to say, okay, cool. They're making payments on three different things routinely. We can trust them. If it's just one, that will be a little bit of a ding. And then the last one is new credit. So if you are applying for a mortgage and applying for a car loan and applying for 3 or 4 or 5 new credit cards at the same time, that'll be a downer. You don't want that to happen on your credit score. And all of these that I'm saying are just how they affect the credit score. So they don't fit in perfectly to the entire financial picture of anybody, but this is just about credit scores, right? And so the new credit, those are mostly if you do a lot of things at the same time. So if you're wanting to buy a house, maybe don't apply for 5 new credit cards within 6 months or a year. I'm not sure the exact rate, but maybe let that settle before you apply for one of the higher dollar loans. And so those are the things that affect your credit score. Those are the things you can take action on that will improve your credit score. And yeah, that's the main aspects here. A couple other interesting things. You can freeze your credit to protect against people opening or attempting to open new accounts if somebody gets a hold of your social security number. So that's a pretty useful tool because that can be a no bueno situation, right? And so in general, credit isn't directly related to, but it can often tie into the situation of monitoring for fraud, monitoring if your social security number gets stolen, if you ever get scammed. You're going to suddenly find yourself a lot more interested in your credit score, your credit reports. And going into credit reports, there are 3 credit bureaus that prepare credit reports. Your credit score is based off of your credit reports. They're not the same thing, but credit scores are based off of credit reports. The 3 credit bureaus are Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. And they are just monitoring and tracking all these same things, all these 5 factors: the payment history, amounts owed, length of credit, credit mix, and new credit. They're also monitoring your address, your various factors: address, social security, date of birth, and you can actually get a free copy of your credit report every 12 months. And you can get every 12 months from each of these bureaus. So you could actually get one every 4 months. You go Experian, then 4 months later you go TransUnion, 4 months later you go Equifax, 4 months later you're back to Experian. You can do that. You can get all 3 at the same time if you want. Typically, it's useful to get it at least like once a year, just to make sure that there's nothing going on that you didn't know about or you weren't expecting. And another useful thing is you are able to dispute something. So if they're saying, hey, you missed this payment, you can say, actually, I didn't, and here's why, here's how, and have the evidence. I don't know exactly what that process looks like, but it's useful to know that it can happen. For some reason, I'm not exactly sure why, but you can actually get a free copy of your credit report each week until the end of 2023. Great. Typically, you're fine if you're just doing it every 6 months, every 4 months, or every year, although there are individual circumstances that can affect that. And obviously this isn't financial advice or anything like that. This is just me spouting off on a podcast about something I was researching. You don't have to take this as gospel truth, and you should do a little bit of research on your own if you're really fascinated or really concerned or have something pretty specific. But this is an overview of what I think is some interesting things, and on a topic that is often a little bit misunderstood. So that's, I believe, all I've got on credit scores, credit reports, but I hope you found this a little bit interesting and or a little bit useful, and I will catch you on the next one. We got a really special episode coming out next week, so thank you everybody and take care.